the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations with
And I
that woman.
realize that this is something
Miss
he is
Lewinsky.
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Backfire with special guest Mylan Blake with us this morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Mylan.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
And Franklin Chansey and John Stanberry. Good morning, guys.
Hey,
Good
Steve.
morning.
One good thing about this, every one of us in this studio are from the same district this morning. Every one of us, even our engineer back here.
That's
Wow.
Mylan, he's came here to get our opinions of things. We appreciate that, Mylan.
right. That's right.
Wow.
This is a constituent meeting.
That constituent. Well, let's see. We talked about Tom Cry being here, but that might be what was it you called it? That would be a
I was just joking with you
Oh, I
about
know.
a violation of the Sunshine Law.
violation. We told him that this was public radio,
Worldwide.
worldwide. That's right. Let's start talking about. Let's see. We got a 7-cent, a 28-cent tax hike, or a $30 wheel tax hike proposal. What are we going to get, Mylan?
Well, I'm only speaking for myself, but I can almost guarantee you in the 99th percentile, you can go ahead and round that up. The 28 cent is never going to go anywhere. So you can just.
Well, why don't we reverse engineer this and back up and talk about what the need is?
Okay.
Oh, sure. I'll
I
talk
mean,
about whatever you want.
why are we talking about a tax increase? First of all, what's the issue driving that?
There's been talk for years about the Lake Forest Middle School, and basically, in order to fund the bond that we would have to issue in order to build Lake Forest, there has to be a revenue stream to pay that bond.
And does that mean then that the other revenue streams out there are already committed in different directions?
There's commitments already been made on the next 2 years of revenue. Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, as John would say, it's already been spent.
As John would say, it's already been committed.
And how much debt do we currently hold?
A little over $70 million.
So we're $70 million in debt, and we need to go in debt more.
We have to go in debt more in order to rebuild Lake Forest.
Well, how much of that $70 million, though, is for capital expenditures?
I think all of it.
All of it. So this is all something where we've built something.
Yeah, I mean,
This isn't to pay for more paper clips
No,
in some office.
no.
This is all for building, right?
No,
But Franklin, we've discussed that before too. You know, you can take it out of the left pocket or you can take it out of the right pocket. If you're spending too much on paper clips out of the left pocket, you have to pay for the capital expense out of the right pocket.
Well,
people like me want to have a discussion of how efficiently are we spending our money, how effectively are we spending our money before we ask for more money from the taxpayer.
And my question would be, as is always my question, where are the cuts that you think ought to be made?
That's what I want to have that conversation first, Franklin. I want to have
Have
that
it.
conversation first.
He's asking you.
I'm
what
asking
you
your
would recommend.
opinion.
Well, here's the problem, Franklin. We got a $6 million fine arts building at Bradley Central High School. That's a wonderful building, and you can't unring a bell. But the point is, we don't ever have this discussion. So nobody said, "Hey, is there a better place to spend the $6 million instead of a fine arts building?" Because guess what? Lake Forest was flooding while they built the $6 million fine arts building. So my point is, if we never have the discussion of where's our money being spent, where's our priorities, Mylan will tell you, we don't prioritize. We don't have zero-based budgeting in the county. So we never get to have a conversation about where should we spend our money.
And I'm inviting you to have that conversation now. What are the things that you think we should cut back on rather than before we do this project or this increase that we're talking
Well, I
about?
tell you, the school board just this week talked about an issue. They've wanted a math coordinator. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit unsold on this whole idea of coordinators because I actually believe individual teachers are competent to teach. But apparently, we got to have all kinds of coordinators. Well, they didn't have it in the budget for the coordinators. So last year, they get some race to the top money, which is a grant money, one-time grant money. What do? They establish a reoccurring position with this grant money. So now they're looking at it and going, well, gosh, that money's gone. So how are we going to pay for that? We want to move that over into the general budget. Well, guess what? We should have had that discussion before we spent grant money. First off, you should never spend grant money on a reoccurring expense. Grant money should be on a capital outlay, a one-time thing. So my point is, let's
was
get
the grant
our
money available for other purposes? I don't know the answer.
It
to
was
that
grant
question.
money,
I
one
know
time.
that, but I mean, was it here's money, do whatever you want to with it, or
Apparently
is it
they had
money
a-
that you had to use for certain?
No,
purposes?
they had a lot of discretion with it, and they chose to hire a reoccurring position with it. Well, now they don't have the money for the reoccurring position. So my point is, we never have an upfront, legitimate conversation of where are we spending our money and should we be spending it there? And quite frankly, I'm going to get a little bit of the information coming in. McMinn County, right up the road, has zero debt. They pay for their schools out of their own money they put back. And the reason they do that is because they have exactly what I'm talking about. They look at their budget on the front end. And they've been able to actually keep their budget low. And in the process, they've been able to put money back in a capital fund.
What's their tax rate?
I'll have that for you next week.
I don't know.
I don't know. Violet,
Yes, sir.
You've done a good job.
Thank you.
Thinking, trying to come up with ways to do things, and I want to give you a big hand.
Thank you. I appreciate
I think
that.
you've been really involved in things. Let me ask you. I read something about the mayor coming up with the budget, but he wasn't going to budget a tax increase. He was going to leave that up to the commissioners.
That's correct. He is going to present his budget as if the tax increase for the. I assume you're talking about the firemen.
I guess that's right.
Yeah. So he's basically putting in proposing his budget like he normally does, and basically we will have to amend his budget and put in the tax increase that was approved 13-1 by the commission in there for him.
What's our current county tax rate, Marlon?
For
Bradley County.
overall county,
Yeah.
$1.8721.
Okay.
Didn't the mayor prepare the original proposal on how much you were going to have to pay these firemen about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
I believe he's prepared their budget every year.
Didn't the mayor's original budget say we can have a county fire department and here's how much we'll have to pay the firemen to hire them? Wasn't that his presentation?
Along with the previous commissions, yeah.
So now 2 years into this, we're going, gosh, we need a 30% increase in their pay. And he now gets to go, you deal with that. Is that what we're doing?
Well, that's basically what I think he's.
So in other words,
saying.
you as a commissioner, you all will get the blame for the tax increase, even though the situation that we're looking at 2 years ago was his numbers for how much it was going to cost.
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the way I see this is, I can't go back and change what didn't happen or what should have happened or what shouldn't have happened. I just know this is the plate that was handed to me, and you.
But that's a very magnanimous position on your part. But my point is, politically, you're going to get all the blame for fixing a mistake that you didn't cause.
But you will remind me, I signed up for this, and I did, and I have a problem in front of me.
I understand.
I'm
but if I were you and if I were the commission as a whole, I would make sure the public understood why you're in the position you're in.
So, I mean,
Well,
there's some who do not believe that the firemen deserve the increase or whatnot. I happen to think they do because I believe that labor is something you have to purchase just like you have to purchase.
Well, has there been a 30% increase in the cost of labor in the last year and a half?
Well, we were losing men.
Because the original estimates were lowballed in order to get the department in place.
That's that could be. But
Well, my point, same thing I was talking with Franklin a minute ago. I think it's important that the community get an accurate and an honest assessment of why we're in the position we're in. Because if you don't ever do that, we keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
Let's talk about the $70 million that we have debt on. What is the $70 million? What's it for?
Schools primarily.
Well, I know, but what
primarily
school?
the schools and the jail.
Well,
We have 6 bonds, I believe. I should have brought it. I have it itemized out for me.
Sure.
I've been working on restructuring the bonds pretty hard, and I have a meeting next week to go over the bond structure again. I believe there is a potential, a lot of savings if we restructure how we pay these bonds. But most of it is schools, all the way from Parkview, the Coe Middle project, Walker Valley, and the jail. I believe those are all the bonds, and the fire stations for
All
the
right.
last ones.
Let me give a little context. I'll tell you, McMinn's tax rate is $1.55, and their rate is 30 cents less than we are, and yet they have zero debt. So their taxpayers pay 30 cents per 100 less, and yet they have zero debt, and they build all their schools with money they saved back. Tell me there's not something different going on in McMinn County.
But they're not growing like we are, I don't think.
Well, one of the only reasons
Economic
they're growing
growth's
is
a factor.
they have a industrial park that's actually set up better than ours. It has fiber optics in it. It has sewer. It has water. It has everything. Now, they're 30 miles further up the road away from the VW park, and that certainly affects them. But golly,
Well, the unemployment rate's been
Well,
substantially higher there too.
because they're 30 miles up the road and they're farther away from the development. But if you're
Well,
They are the friendly city, you know.
tell me that
They're
we're not
also on
going
the
to
internet,
criticize
too.
a county
No,
for
I'm not
having a lower
criticizing
tax
them.
rate
We're
and
talking.
no debt.
We're comparing them, but you can't say it.
I can
that
say
they're
it
the
can
same
be
thing
done.
sometimes.
Here's the point, Franklin. Normally you go, if I give you an example from California, it's a very logical argument back to say, that's California. When I give you an argument 30 miles up the road, that's probably doable if we lived right. If we budgeted right, if we looked at things on the front end instead of the back end, and if we weren't underestimating the cost of new government bureaucracies in order to get them, and then a year and a half later go, oh, my bad, 30% increase.
My point is that if you're going to make the comparison, you've got to fully make
They've
the
got
comparison.
2 high schools, Franklin.
You
They
can't
have
just
fire
pick the parts you
departments.
like.
They have parks. They have softball fields. They have tennis courts. They have all kinds of things in Athens.
Okay.
And they have zero debt and a lower tax rate. So somehow they were able to do that. And I'm not saying we ought to match them, but, you know, we're going in the opposite
John,
direction.
nobody has said that
We're
your
80.
concept of looking at these things is wrong. What I have
Well, when are
said
we gonna
is
do
that it's
it?
incumbent upon us
Do that.
to offer specifics.
Well, then let's do that.
They
Before
do-
we raise the tax rate, let's go
so
with
I
that.
keep saying, tell me what your specifics are that you would propose.
Franklin, I'm not on the commission.
No, you're
I
not.
don't have all the
and
facts
I'm not
at my
the president of the
disposal.
United States, but we're commenting on what he does all the time in here. We can't say it that way. We got to be specific about what our criticisms
Well,
are.
personally,
Why
I
don't
think
we look at what they've done and see if we can't copy it?
Okay, fine.
Well, I mean, in order to get to zero debt, we have to aggressively tackle our debt. I mean, in order to do that, in the bonds we have obviously variables and fixed. There's not much we can do with the fixed. You can't aggressively go after them the way that I understand but you can with the variables, and that's what I hope to do is to get the finance committee to work with me on aggressively going after our debt. I mean, right now we're paying about $4.5 million of
But
our
we're
debt
adding
off.
to it now.
We haven't added
add to it.
We haven't added to it yet.
But we're going to.
Well, I
That's
mean,
what this whole discussion
That's
is
what
about.
the Lake Forest is, but
McMinn
at the
County
same-
just
that
built the
doesn't-
Justice Department, $7 million paid cash for it.
I believe that we
Zero
can.
debt.
I believe we can do Lake Forest, and we're going to have to issue a bond for that. We don't have $18 million in cash, and aggressively come up with a plan on tackling our debt. I mean, you can go borrow money, and you also can pay off your debt at the same time.
Would you be willing to say?
But we don't have $18 million in cash.
Would you be willing to say, if we get the Lake Forest school replaced, you wouldn't be until we get our debt paid out, not to build any more schools?
here's the
That wouldn't be very responsible.
here's the things that
I mean, the population's growing fairly
All right,
rapidly
I'm
here.
glad you brought that up, Franklin. What happens when the population grows?
It depends on how it's growing.
Your tax base is supposed to grow. All of these additional services
well, that's
that you're
not
getting
necessarily
No,
true,
it
John,
is.
unless it's property owners.
Actually, it
Those
is
are not
true,
all property
Franklin.
owners.
We are always sold this bill of goods that, growth is going to do this. And with the increased growth, you have increased school needs, increased sewer needs. Guess what? The growth's supposed to pay for all that. But guess what we do? And this is my whole point. We never have these conversations. Growth money comes in just like the Vocker money. We spent that Vocker money 2 and 3 and 4 times. Anytime a project came up, we go, oh, yeah, let's do that. We're going to have the Vocker money. Well, guess what? Not only has the Vocker money not showed up yet, but it's been spent 2 or 3 times. So we keep being sold a bill of goods, and none of it is correct. And right up the road in McMinn County, they seem to be able to find a way to do it differently. You know, the Governor Haslam had a 5% across the board cut in state government. Have we done that in the county? Have we gone to the departments and said, you know what, guys, we're spending more than we can afford. We need to cut back.
No, I don't believe we have.
Well, personally, as a small government conservative, I would like to see us make an effort to cut back before we ask to stick our hand in the taxpayer's pocket another time.
Oh, John, I think you must have made something that got through. No comments. Go ahead.
I'm just going to repeat the question. Tell me the savings you want.
I just said,
No,
have
you
we
didn't.
asked for a 5% across the board cut?
He did say a 5%.
I don't know if you can do that though, John.
The governor did it.
I don't care what the governor did, but here in Bradley County, I mean, to go into departments and say you got to start eliminating head count, I think.
I didn't say head count. I said a 5%.
Well, that's where most
Find
of
a
your
way.
savings is. I mean, I can tell you this: we are aggressively going after the travel line items and these other line items that we can. I mean, unless you by law have to travel for a reason, none of this. It's nice to travel and all this kind of stuff. Travel in Bradley County government is getting cut big, but it's not $1 million worth of travel.
Well, Polk County just built a high school up there for $8 million, but
Yeah.
it's going to cost $18 million for us to build a middle school.
No, it cost us 12, but we have to give 6 over to the city.
Well, we got Mayfield, and I know that's the city, but it's the second most expensive per square foot school in the country.
I know.
As a county that claims to be a conservative Republican county, we sure do seem to like spending money.
We like to invest money, I think, John.
And that's a fair statement to make. When some of these expenditures are investments in the
Well, was
community.
the fine arts building an investment?
I would say that it was.
Was it necessary? Was it more necessary than a leaking, flooding school?
That's a fair question to pass on to the school board.
And I think the last election let the people know what they thought about those
Well,
decisions.
the last election we ought to be focused on is the vote on the wheel tax. The county residents made it pretty clear how they feel about tax increases.
The county residents also, when they found out that a property tax is being proposed, most of the communications I'm receiving are basically saying if there's going to be a tax, we prefer a wheel tax. I mean, almost 9 to 1.
But the given there is if there's going to be a tax. I mean, hey, if you're going to kill me, I'd rather you kill me this way.
John, here's the thing. The way I see this is Lake Forest is a big mistake. And I don't mean that.
It was.
I don't mean that against the teachers and the kids that go to school there.
The placement of the building.
We have a mistake.
But that's a 40-year-old mistake.
It's a 40-year-old.
And we've put it off for 40 years while we spent money on other
do I
stuff.
put it off for another 4 years?
No, but my point is we haven't fixed the hole in the boat yet. We haven't talked about how do we avoid this ongoing. We've got fire halls right now that are sinking, just like Lake Forest is sinking.
And
we made the same mistake over, and the taxpayer will be asked to pay. One of the problems is if you run a business and you have shareholders and you screw up, the shareholders make you pay. But government elected officials never seem to have to pay for their mistakes. The taxpayer pays for it.
Government is the people. I mean, it's not my money. It's not Franklin's money or your money. It's the people's money.
I'm not fussing at Milan.
Milan's doing
one of the
a great
good guys
job.
on there. But my problem is with just the entity
I'm used
as
to
a
it.
whole. Government doesn't really seem to care about the people a whole lot. As long as you can marshal your votes, and guess what? If you can build a new government department with a bunch of employees, they're all going to go out and vote for you and work for you.
You know, Howard Thompson sometimes makes some great comments. He does. He comes out with some great comments. First of all, he wants to know, are we going to build the school in the same spot?
That is a legitimate question. That is absolutely a legitimate question.
Of course we're going to. That's the way we're headed. So we're going to put a tax increase on. We're going to spend $12 million and build it in the same sinkhole that it's went. So, Franklin, when you say that's a 40-year-old mistake, welcome to the future.
That's right. So,
And I think that's a totally appropriate discussion to be having.
well, we ought to have it
Before we raise
do it.
taxes, we
Before
should
we
have
raise
that
taxes.
discussion.
Next thing.
But to be clear,
We are having those discussions,
I mean,
though.
that is the discussion we're having. And number two, who gets to make that decision?
Ultimately, the school board gets
Okay?
to make that.
So, well, I'm going to go back. I'm the guy who's been on this bandwagon for 2 years. This is what's goofy about our system. Now, it's pretty much statewide. But why do we have the county commission deciding funding for a body who makes the decisions about where things are going to go or not? Why doesn't that body have the taxing authority to make those decisions so there's direct accountability?
Well,
Well, look, I don't. On one hand, I don't want them to have taxing authority because I think we'd get screwed pretty royally.
Because
but
you like this
no,
goofed
I
up
don't
system
like it.
where everybody can blame the
I'm
other
gonna
guy,
agree with you,
which is part of the reason
school
why we
board-
have these
The
problems.
school board, I can tell you, my wife as a county commissioner offered to send a resolution to Nashville requesting that, and Bob Taylor and the school board very quickly started going, no, we don't want
That's
that.
my point. Everybody likes the idea that they can point the finger at somebody else instead of just taking the responsibility.
Actually, that-
I appreciate what Mylan's done because he's stepped up and been willing to take some flack and say, well, here it is.
The
If
commission
we're going
doesn't
to do
get
it,
to point
this is
the
what we
finger.
got to do.
You're right on the point in the finger, but that's all
well,
on the school board side.
points it back
But
at
the
them.
commission is the one that it actually has to either raise taxes or not raise
That's
taxes.
right, but they don't get to decide about the schools.
Well, they don't have to give them the money if they're going to build the school in the same sinkhole.
then-
That's
then
true,
they have
but
all
why
the
don't you
activists-
trust those people that you elected to make those decisions? You elect them too.
But then you have all the activists show up in Mylan's
And then-
district going, he hates children.
And then guess what? And
I
then
don't hate
John
children.
gets to have his discussion strictly on the non-school portion of the county budget and looking at those expenditures, which is a lot cleaner and a lot simpler to analyze and figure out because all those decisions then aren't tied up in the welfare of the children.
Well, Howard Thompson made another comment. Said he wanted to wait for the opinion from the state attorney general on the HCI money.
You know, and I appreciate and I have all the respect for Commissioner Thompson, but he's a little bit confused on that, and I kind of did Education 101 on that whole concept. What happened with the state attorney, the attorney general with Mike Smith and Crystal Freiberg has nothing to do with whether or not we build Lake Forest or not.
It's a
But
bond.
it has to do with whether you have to have a tax
And
increase
that money
or not.
can't be used for that project.
Well,
can
it's
it?
no,
It's for the bond.
Oh, for the bond. If
he's
he does
purchasing
that.
a bond just like he would purchase a bond from anybody.
Right, but if you have the money yourself and you can make the determination to loan it to yourself, you're not going to have the tax increase that you're talking about.
We still have to show the revenue in the line item to pay him the bond. Just like we would have to, if you bought the bond, I have to pay you your principal and interest. I have to pay the trustee his principal and
Well, the
interest.
assumption
on,
is
on
that
the
it would
schedule.
save you some money at least.
The beauty of what this all does is it keeps the money in Bradley County. The interest that we pay him, he obviously
stay here.
it stays here and it gets granted out for projects that.
And by the way, Mike, from what I understand, has already had a meeting, and
Yeah.
I think the meeting was positive.
That's what he told me this morning.
Good. Let me ask you a question. With the $70 million debt that we have, the bond rates go up. Is that right?
A lot of those are fluctuating,
If it goes well,
They're actually
you're
pretty
talking-
good rates now. I mean,
but they're fluctuating rates.
they're variable.
Are they not? Variable
Some of them.
rates.
I mean,
And
it's a
we've been in a
educated-
historically good environment. If you want to have a conversation that's a real serious one, it's what if the rates start going up, and how does that affect?
We budget for 5%, so if they go up, we don't have to make any adjustments in the line
A
items.
5% increase in the rate.
No,
At 5% rate.
they're under 1% now.
Right.
So if they go up to go all the way up to 5, and then we have an issue. But I don't think they're going to go up to 5.
So wait a
anytime
minute,
soon.
hold on a minute. Now that raises some interesting financing questions here. So if we're budgeting for 5% and we're paying 1%, where's that surplus going?
Oh, Frank, don't ask questions like that. We need some money to play with.
No, he can ask that. The money stays in debt services to pay even more. That's why we've been able to.
So are you saying we're paying extra on the debt?
We're paying about $4.5 million.
So we're
on
actually paying principal down.
right, and that's what I was speaking
All right,
to.
now
That's what I was speaking to
that's
earlier.
That's a positive thing that you're telling me.
What I was speaking to earlier is when we talked about issuing the bond for Lake Forest at $18 million, and working with the people who do bonds for a living, they basically have said that we can budget at 3.25%, so we can make that. We don't have to put that much in debt services because they don't anticipate the market going up anytime soon on that. And that's where I said what you just said is, okay, let's go back and revisit the bonds.
Well, now tell me specifically though. I mean, what's the difference in the bond service between 1% and 5%?
Once the money goes into the debt service fund, that's all it can be used for. You can't go say, oh, there's some extra savings in there, and let's take it and build something, or let's go.
He's saying that the state has requirements that you have to meet, and we exceed those requirements.
You can't take money out once it's voted
Hold
on.
on. What I'm saying is,
once the money goes into debt services, that's what the money has to go to. It has to go to pay debt. You can't take money out of debt services and put it in the general fund or the fire fund or the Pike Road fund.
Sure, but if we're paying 1% on $70 million, okay.
Well, there's fixed in there that's higher. So I mean, it's all over the place.
But I think we average about 1.7.
I mean, I'll get you
but
the,
what I'm
the
saying
schedule.
is
We pay about $7 million.
You use the phrase though we're budgeting for $5 million. That means that there's
5%.
5%. I mean, excuse me, 5%, which means that there's excess over what we're actually paying that's built into the budget.
That goes
is
into.
It going? But where is that money? Is the question?
In debt services.
It can once it goes in that, it can only be used for that.
And like I was saying, it goes back and pays what it can in principal and interest. We also have to budget for the fees that go along with all these bonds,
Sure.
the insurance and all that kind of stuff. So it's all part in there. But the savings, the gap, what you're talking about, the spread, is there's 4%. In theory,
okay.
Obviously it fluctuates. That is going back into paying the bonds.
That's
why we're
a couple $1 million.
I know, and that's why we're.
So would we expect at that rate next year
the first
principal $68 million?
The first time I looked at the bond was a couple of years ago when I was following the commission area. It was it was 80 million.
So we're paying down debt is the point we're trying to make.
This year in the 14-15 budget, we're paying down $4.5 million.
But Franklin, before you get real excited, we're talking about adding $18 million back to it.
I understand that, but the point is, when we're talking about whether or not the current representatives are spending money wisely or not, this is an example where they're actually budgeting for the future, as you have been arguing for, by paying down the debt.
I would love to see us at zero debt. I mean, like I keep.
So in other words,
I keep us down
Franklin,
as much as I can.
They're being very responsible while paying down the irresponsible debt load.
Well, the fact is that the
If you
current
didn't agree
commission
with,
did
the
not
building-
incur all the debt, right? You agree with that?
We're going to take this call real quick. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, good morning, guys. This is Mike Smith.
Good morning, Mike Smith. Good to have you on the air with us.
Great. I was listening to you guys this morning driving in, and just want to throw in one thing there. You're talking about the financing and the cushion you got to have from the loan to put in debt service. Mylan's exactly right. You have to have a cushion there that would pick up the difference of what your bond payment may be next year. The bonding company is usually the one that requests 5%. The issue of the county borrowing from itself, we can really help the county there by putting a cap in there. If you only have just guessing, a 1% cap possibility for the next year, you reduce that 5% reserve you've got to have to a 1% reserve. So that's going to save your 4% on the bond. So just wanted to clear that up, that there's some savings there also, and but Mylan is on the right track.
Hey, how do you think it went the other day when you went to Nashville?
It was very positive. There's a couple of things that Crystal Freiberg, our county attorney, is going to be doing with the Attorney General's office and the Comptroller's office, but there wasn't a negative word spoken, so I think we have a chance to do it and get approval from the state. But it still doesn't mean that that's going to be what's best for the county when it comes down. I always try to throw that caveat in there because that's going to have to be looked at by the Finance Committee and the mayor of all the proposals they've got. And this will just be one of them.
All right. Do you guys have any more questions for Mike? Mike, thanks so much for calling in. And as usual, you always do a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or apply today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Dr. Christopher Chase, with Associates in Plastic Surgery, now offers his patients the convenience of a Cleveland office at 2350 North Ocoee Street. Dr. Chase specializes for the ladies in breast augmentation, including lifts, reconstructions, and reductions, also tummy tucks or mommy makeovers, and facial rejuvenation, including facelifts, eyelids, brows, nose, and he also offers Botox procedures. Check out Dr. Christopher Chase. He is certified by the American Board of Surgery, the American Board of Plastic Surgery. He's a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Check their website out at aprs.md. That's aprs.md. Call for your convenient appointment in Cleveland at 624-0021. 624-0021. 2350 North Ocoee. That's Dr. Christopher Chase.
If you're looking for a home, apartment, or office space, Jones Properties provides residential and commercial properties in the heart of the Southeast that will fulfill any need. Plus, Jones Properties is one of the fastest growing firms in the area, which offers you more security. When you're ready for a home, apartment, or in need for commercial office space, it makes sense to call Jones Properties first at 472-4000. Plus, you can get additional information by logging on to the website at www.jones.com. www.jonesproperties.biz. Jones Properties is also looking to invest in properties. So if you have a property that you need to sell, call the professional team at Jones Properties first. They'll help you find the perfect property for whatever your needs. Call today 472-4000. And don't forget to keep up with Jones Properties on Facebook.
All right, we're back. Anyway, good to have Mylan Blake in here. Commissioner Blake.
Blake.
Yeah, Blake. Blake. Anyway, and John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey, I'd like to bring up one more issue locally about our dog tax.
Our dog tax.
What's going on with our animals right now? The county has made a plan and sent it back. They've made a missile and they've shot it back towards the city right now, showing a $200,000 savings. Tell us about that plan.
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to speak to that too much. I was not at that meeting, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to anyone about it. So from what I gather, just from hearsay, is that the quote-unquote ad hoc committee that was put together to negotiate what we're going to do with the animal control came up with the idea of offering the SPCA services to the city, and they believe there's a savings there to the city. So I don't know where that's going to go.
Well, the city has a $500,000 budget, and the county's offering to do it for $300,000
or something like that.
Saving the city $200,000.
Yeah, but my thing on that is, and this is something I brought up in the commission. This is kind of what happened when I first got on there. Is as a county resident, and we're all here county residents who happen to live in the city, and I made this pretty clear. We already paying when we all pay our taxes to Mike Smith, who we just talked to on the phone. We're paying money into the general fund, and I know for a fact that the general fund is what's paying that contract. So we all five here are paying for a service that we are told we can't use, and I have a problem with that. If they're going to go to the city and say, "Oh, we can reduce your cost," I understand it in principle, but we're already paying.
But let me circle back around, which is what I seem to like to do. Now, I love my animals. I have all kinds of animals. I have birds and dogs and cats and rabbits. But do we think that our kids slogging through a flooding school is a higher or a lower priority than our cats and dogs?
I believe that our kids are more priority. That's why I don't know much
that's
about
my problem.
I've
and
been
Franklin,
focused on Lake Forest.
That's what you and I were arguing about. We never have the right discussion on the front end of these things. We never set priorities, because we can come out and we can go, look, guys, we're going to have an air-conditioned pound. And everybody, who's going to come out and say, oh, I'm against an air-conditioned pound? But guess what? There's a limited amount of money. There's a limited source of resources to do things with. And so when there's a limited amount, you have to say what's more important, air-conditioned pound, flooding school. Most people with that comparison in hand would say flooding school's more important. But guess what? We never have that.
I don't think that if we've got a flooding school, if we're going to build another school in the same spot.
Well, why would you want to have that conversation, Steve? What's wrong with you?
I can't imagine.
Just because the school is flooding because it sank into the dirt out there.
Maybe they don't think it'll sink on top of the other one. I don't know.
Build on top of the ruins.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to build it in that parking lot behind the gym, from what I understand.
What they really ought to do is they ought to build it up on maybe an 8 to 10 foot kind of pod. And what they could do is they could have a staircase going up to it with removable stairs. So over the years, as it sank, you'd have at least a 10-foot cushion that it could sink. You'd just every year or two remove the bottom stair.
Don't worry, folks. He'll be here all week.
While we were on break, we had a nice conversation here in the studio. The city has a golf course out there. It costs them $30,000 a month. We can take that property and put the school there, right?
That'd be your city councilman that you need to talk to about
Actually,
that.
I think the city council ought to give the county that property for their school.
Well, the taxpayer already owns it, and that's the problem we run into, us and them, but it's all the taxpayer.
But it should be something that we just say, here, we have some land now. If you need a school, Here it is.
And Mylan, by the way, in the discussion earlier about the $5 million or 5%, how much of that is interest and how much of that is fees?
We budget about $600,000 in fees.
Well, with the HCI loan, you'd have no fees.
That's right. And that's one of the beauties that I brought out in the county. Yes, you would. You wouldn't, because
Don't you still have to buy some bonds, though?
Well,
You're just talking about the management fees.
That's one of the questions. I was sitting there looking at the budget, and we had the gentleman from the bond company, and I was like,
Let me guess, the bond company's against this, right?
No, they
no, because as I recall, Mike Smith said you would still have to buy. You still have to have a bond. This is a smaller bond.
Yeah, we have to put the bond on. Well, it's a longer bond.
Yeah.
The amount doesn't matter, but. I said, what in the world is this $600,000 in this line item for? And it just titles it fees. When we have to put money or budget money that when, let's say you guys, John buys, $1 million worth of bonds and Franklin buys $1 million and you want to sell them, we have to pay those transaction costs when you decide to sell your bond to somebody else or to each other, whatever. We have to absorb that cost. So we have to budget for that. Obviously, with the trust,
0.8%
with the trust,
I mean, if they sell it 3 and 4 and 5 times, we pay that every
that's
time.
What I'm still.
So they're making money off of us, and we're paying them for the service.
My thing is once you buy the bond, you stick. You keep it. Don't sell it, because that would lower how much we have to budget. That's the beauty of what Mike's doing. Is
Mike would be managing.
He would be our only
no
customer,
fee.
so to speak, and he's not going to sell it, so we can reduce that. Plus, what he referred to earlier.
Well, plus you don't pay Mike a fee other than he's already there.
We don't pay the transfer fee if he's not going to sell it.
I know, but my point is, you're also with these bonding companies. You're paying a management fee and those.
You still have to go
fees.
through all that. I mean, we can't just say walk across the street. Here's our bond. I mean, it has to go through the market and all that kind of stuff. It's just he's going to buy it, but. Like he said earlier, he's going to have a cap. I mean, that's the most that he's ever going to charge. So we can budget according to that cap because it'll never go above that. That'll save us some money as well.
There's some savings involved.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the interest we pay goes into his account, which goes to the HCI committee, and the HCI committee will grant that out.
Mylan, would the commission ever consider voting to fund the school with the requirement that it be built on better land?
I don't know if we can do that. That's a school board issue. I mean, they.
I can tell you that
in the resolution that we passed, and it corresponds with their resolution, we basically put in there that we're going to spend $12 million, and it puts in there that we want them to use as much as possible local contractors.
But that's not counting the city's portion either, right?
No, that's not.
So it's actually $18 million.
That the resolution to issue the bond will have that in there.
Well,
this is the resolution.
$16 million.
18
It's a third.
$18 million. It'll be close to $18 million.
Okay.
But we put in there that they had to furnish their own furniture and all that kind of stuff. So the resolution spells out what their obligations are. But I don't think we can say, where they put the school or whatnot.
I know that they've been told years ago by a builder, look, there's a small piece of this that's probably decent land where the main building is. You could keep the gym, you could keep the main building, you could make that into an elementary school, which they claim they need, and you build a middle school somewhere else where you got better land.
Wonderful golf course.
Well, the golf course, I said earlier on the break, would also be an excellent place for an industrial park. Access to roads, there's infrastructure there.
Mm-hmm. I want to change the conversations here just a little bit. You might want to put on your headsets. I want to play a little something. All right, hit it. That's the mama beating the crap out of herself.
Get over here now!
In Baltimore.
That's gone pretty viral across the country.
I'm going to tell you something. She should be voted Mama of the Year for sure. I just, if more of the mamas would do what that lady did, we wouldn't have the kind of stuff that's going on in some of these communities. And
well, did you see the boy? The boy said when he saw his mama, he said, "My first inclination was to run, but I knew if I ran, I'd get in more trouble."
Well, that's the way it is with the mama.
Well, I tell you, there's a lot of sad things that they showed a man standing out in front of his row home, black man. He said, we've lived here 50 years, and they burned the store next to him, but it, of course, engulfed his house. And he said, my entire family heritage has been destroyed.
Yeah. It's just a shame. And
well, the mayor, look, I don't want to beat up on her because she's got a really tough situation, but you can't separate yourself from your rhetoric. Now, she went out and made a statement that was real. I heard her. I heard the statement live when she said it, and it was really jarring to hear her make the statement that they wanted to give room to the people that wanted to destroy.
I think the context of this, first of all, it was poorly worded. I agree with you about that. But the context of what she was saying, was not that. It was, we wanted to give them room to have protests, and because of that, by extension, we ended up giving them space.
Well, Franklin, you may want to give her that credit.
I'm not giving her credit. I said she worded it poorly, but that was the point she was trying to make.
No, here's my point. She didn't word it poorly. She said what she meant to say, and then when she realized how it came across, she added 3 words as a result, which completely changed the meaning of what she had said. But there was no stuttering, there was no hesitancy. She said what she said.
Read what she said.
It. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, now that's the protesters she's talking, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. There was no break. There was no pause. There was no.
John,
she said what she said.
You don't honestly think she really meant we intentionally tried to make it possible for people to destroy property?
I think that that in the past she hasn't been forced to live with the consequences of her political rhetoric, and I think her political rhetoric came out honest in the first hand, and then she realized as mayor she's now having to deal with the consequences of that rhetoric.
Let me add to some things that were said. And before I say it, I want to go ahead and put this on. I think Obama is definitely the worst president we've ever had or ever will have again. And here's some comments he made. But I think we as a country have to do some soul searching. This is not new. He went on to say there's no excuse for the riots and the violence. He did say it this time. But then he said it's a handful of people taking advantage of the situation for their own purposes. And they need to be treated as criminals. I want to say that he did say that this time. But then he went on to say, he added to it, and this is the part that gets me. It's a deeper problem, is a lack of education opportunities for many of the kids, and a criminal justice system that is a pipeline from schools to prisons. Yeah. Tell me where the truth in what he just said was.
The neighborhoods where this happened,
they're not giving them education opportunities.
There's something like a 52% unemployment rate. You think the best schools in Baltimore are there?
Let's go to
I doubt it.
Well, no, let me translate for you, Steve. I'm not disagreeing with Franklin a whole lot. What he's saying is the failed liberal policies of inner city Democrat administrations has left these people with no hope. He's admitting his complete inability to affect change.
In the particular neighborhoods that you're talking about, there's been a huge exodus from that area. The population of Baltimore's fallen something like 35% of last year.
Exactly like Detroit.
Well, but at the same time, unlike Detroit, there's been huge investments of money in Baltimore in the more affluent areas along the waterfront, things like that, for tourist purposes and so forth.
Trying to improve trying to get some tourism.
But the question is, to John's point, okay, we don't always look at where we're spending money and who we're spending it for. And so you've got neighborhoods there where there literally are no jobs. You saw yesterday, for example, there were tons of people who came out in those neighborhoods to clean up their neighborhoods.
What is a shovel-ready job?
Well, I would assume it's a job that the contracts have already been identified and ready to start.
Let me ask you a question. How many Target stores will Target build in Baltimore now?
I don't know, John.
Well, here's the point.
John, I agree with you.
Liberal progressive politics always finds someone else to blame. They
I'm
never
not blaming
hold people.
Anybody.
But you're not. Let me finish.
What the president said was there's a problem here.
But the
and we can't
president
act like
is
it
the
doesn't
problem.
exist.
His policies are the problem. For decades, they've told people you don't have to be responsible for your actions. You don't have to be responsible for your lives. So these idiots, to be honest, who have been educated in a liberal school system in these inner cities, they look and they go, let's go burn the Target down. Well, guess what? Target goes, that's why we don't build we don't build stores in these kind of neighborhoods, because we don't want to take the risk of our store being burned to the ground because one person got abused.
John,
Look,
the school system in
police,
Baltimore operates under the same rules as the school system in Tennessee.
Yes, and the liberal Washington bureaucratic nightmare that the school systems have become through the Department of Education, the liberal policies of entrenched Democratic office holders in Detroit, in Baltimore.
I thought it was a lovely comment that our own Senator Alexander had yesterday, where he was asked about some of these topics, and he said, I campaigned for a long time about the idea of we ought to abolish the Department of Education. He goes, that sounded really good on the campaign trail, and he basically acknowledged that it was a horrible idea. Now, because he's no longer running for office at this point.
Well, actually,
that was his statement.
I will disagree, and I will agree with him. I agreed with him when he said we ought to abolish it. I disagree with him now that he's become basically an entrenched Washington career politician. Now, he's our guy, and I like him, and he does, on average, a pretty good job. But they get in there, and they get happy with the status quo.
The problem is that you have this conservative fantasy that before the Department of Education came along, all of our schools were just rosy. And that's just not a fact. And there were lots and lots and lots of places all over America where the school systems were doing a terrible job. And so the idea that the problem started with that is just
since about the 20s, Franklin.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? We educated people before the 20s without public schools.
In many parts of the country and lots of places, we did a crappy job.
Let me ask you.
Well, we're doing a crappy job pretty much everywhere now.
Let me ask this, and I'm probably going to catch a lot of rhetoric for this comment, but I think it's worth saying. Somebody brought it up to me. I thought it was a pretty good idea. If you are caught riding in the streets, throwing these rocks, burning one of these buildings in this protest type deal, and you're drawing food stamps or you're drawing some kind of government subsidy, and that was cut out for 1 year, do you think that there would be as much of that?
Well, I don't have any problem.
I'm just talking about it just like a fine.
I don't have any problem with holding people accountable, from what I've read at least. Mm-hmm. A huge swath of these people who were doing this were teenagers.
I think you'd see a lot more of those mamas coming down.
You know what, Franklin? When a teenager pulls the trigger on a gun, the bullet still kills you.
Absolutely, John. I'm not making an excuse for that.
I'm
responding to his question.
I know, but let me give you a couple examples. The good liberal mayor waited an entire day before she imposed a curfew. The president was touring the Washington Monument, had an Oval Office meeting with the newly sworn-in Attorney General of the Justice Department. Neither one of them addressed this. But he waited an entire day before he addressed this. Well, guess what? That tells the rioters, you can get away with this. You can do it, and there won't be any consequences.
I find it rather hard to believe that the rioters were sitting around watching CNN.
You're right, Franklin.
Making their decision that the president is somehow tacitly authorizing us to go burn
because
CBS.
It's the same thing he did in Ferguson's. It's the same thing he did down with Trayvon Martin. They've become established that they can do this and get away with it.
I don't know if you've noticed there's sort of a pattern you're stuck in, John, which is basically if the president comments, he should have shut up.
Franklin,
and if he doesn't comment, he should have talked.
Well, that's because he either doesn't say what he should or he says the wrong thing. So, yeah, Franklin.
Which thing did he say there that was wrong?
Well,
these people have to be held accountable.
It's a lack of education.
But let's not pass up the opportunity to talk about the problems that exist. What's wrong with that?
Let me give you an example how this would work, Franklin. If you sent the guard in there and they physically pushed these people back and said, we are not going to tolerate this. And to be perfectly honest, Franklin, now this will get me in trouble, but if you're out in the street and you throw a brick at the police officer, I don't think you ought to be surprised when he shoots you. And you do that a little bit, and other towns, other cities go, you know what? They're not going to put up with this stuff. We better find a peaceful way to protest. But what we've done under this president, and it's happened in society, not just this president, we have basically excused everything away. Oh, well, you know, they're poor. Guess what? Poor people have been around for millennia, and they didn't have to kill, riot, and burn their neighbors' businesses down because they were poor. A lot of them said, how do I get out of poverty? And they worked hard. We've destroyed that work ethic because of, to be honest, the president and your liberal progressive policy.
What you saw yesterday was tons of people in Baltimore in those neighborhoods who have a perfully fine work ethic. They would love to have jobs.
Well, if your president hadn't been in office the last 6 years, they might.
Well, they have more jobs than when he got there.
Actually,
I want to say this
they don't.
This is a comment that I read this article, and it's called A Letter from Black America, and it's about a black lady making some comments. She was walking down the beach, and her and some of her friends, and you know, she's a college graduate. There's a bunch of them, and there was somebody comes down the beach with a gun shooting, and everybody took off running, and you know, she grabbed her grandchild and all this stuff, scared to death, but none of them thought about calling the police.
Because in the communities, in these inner cities,
right,
it's actually, you're not supposed to call the police. And that's another thing that the Democrat establishment in these big inner cities has fostered. The police force in Baltimore, for example, Franklin, is overwhelmingly black. Now, the president, you wanted me to criticize something he directly said. He said that we have racism problems. Well, how do you have racism problems with an overwhelmingly black police force?
I want to read just a little bit. The Condemnation of Blackness puts it, white people by and large do not know what it is like to be occupied by a police force. They don't understand it because it is not the type of policy that they experience, because they are treated like individuals. They believe that if I am not breaking the law, I will never be abused. What is the problem that these people think that if they're not breaking the law, they'll be abused?
Because, in fact, that does happen, particularly in these neighborhoods.
I mean, you know what?
Does it happen to the Korean immigrants?
Yeah.
Does it happen to the Chinese immigrants, the Vietnamese immigrants?
Well, there's your point, John. That exactly is.
They live in those neighborhoods. They own a lot of these businesses. And guess what happens when we have a riot? Their businesses get blown up and burned to the ground because of racism, to be perfectly honest, towards them. But nobody ever defends them. Nobody ever criticizes the people that do that.
When you've got Black Panther cheerleaders on the streets encouraging this.
Well, this president set the tone. When you have Black Panthers standing in front of a voting precinct with dark glasses, holding wooden batons, swatting them in their hands, and you already have secured convictions for them under the Bush administration, and the first thing that Attorney General does under the Obama administration is to drop all the charges and let them go, that sends a message. And welcome to his world. This is the message that all of this race baiting and identity politics that the liberals use to gin up votes, this is what you get for it.
I will say one thing. Obama was a whole lot quieter this time than he was when the Ferguson outbreak broke out.
Well, I do want to say one good thing. There's a story about some Navy midshipmen that had gone to the ball game, and they were in a Subway shop. And one of them sitting by the front window, and a brick comes through, glass goes everywhere. There were families in there that started hiding, running to the back of the store. These midshipmen got up and ushered all the people to the back of the Subway shop, and then formed a line in front of them to protect them. One of them was a woman midshipman, and they stood there. The manager had to go lock the door, and one of them escorted the manager to the door to lock the door, and then they stood there while the rioters came by protecting them. Now, once the rioters went by, these midshipmen actually removed their mortarboards and insignia because they didn't want to be mistaken for police officers, made it to the stadium, and then were finally able to get out. But they protected the people.
Well, all I can say is I don't think they were looking for a sandwich at that time. They were headed towards the drugstores and the liquor stores first.
Well, the Target, they literally emptied the entire store.
Mylon, thank you for coming by this morning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We weren't too hard on you, were we?
No. I agree with both Franklin and John. I encourage discussion.
You're a real politician. You
No,
agree
I
with
do.
a Democrat and a Republican.
Now, Mylon, everybody who listens to this show knows that it's impossible to agree with both John
I do.
and Franklin.
Well,
Every now and then.
John knows. I've worked with John for years. We've talked about many issues. I've known you for last year, so.
Mylon, thank you for what you do.
I do appreciate you coming in.
John, Franklin, thank you for what you do. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.
Double features, lots more time to hold her tight. So let the sun shine bright